The Jedi Council chamber was immersed in a heavy silence, interrupted only by the distant hum of speeders cutting through the night sky of Coruscant. Anakin Skywalker remained motionless before the empty chairs, his fists clenched as each second seemed to drag like an eternity. He had obeyed Mace Windu, staying behind while the Master departed with other Jedi to confront Chancellor Palpatine. The force around him was turbulent, echoes of distant conflict reverberating through the connection all Jedi shared. His heart hammered in his chest, torn between duty and fear of what might happen to Padme. The vision of her dying in childbirth still haunted every thought, but he had made his choice, trusting the Council for the first time in weeks. Now all that remained was to wait and pray it wasn't too late. The chamber doors opened abruptly, and Mace Windu entered with firm steps. Windu's face was marked by a somber expression, but there was something different in his eyes, a mixture of relief and concern. Anakin stood immediately, searching for some sign of what had happened. Windu stopped before him, breathing controlledly before speaking. "It's done, Skywalker. Palpatine was indeed Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord we've been searching for years. He resisted arrest and left us no choice." The words hit Anakin like lightning, confirming what he had begun to suspect, but still shocking in its reality. The man who had been his mentor, his confidant, was responsible for the entire war, for all the deaths, for all the manipulation. Before he could fully process the information, his communicator vibrated urgently. It was from the medical center. Padme was in labor. Anakin didn't wait for a second permission, running through the temple corridors toward the hangar. His speeder cut through Coruscant's night at maximum speed, each second seeming crucial. When he arrived at the medical center, the medical droids were already finishing the procedure. He entered the room just in time to see Padme holding two small beings wrapped in blankets, her eyes tired but shining with life and love. She was alive. The twins were healthy. His vision had been just that, a vision, not an immutable destiny. Anakin knelt beside the bed, gently touching Padme's face and then the small faces of Luke and Leia. "You're okay. You're all okay," he whispered, his voice broken with emotion. Padme smiled weakly, her hand finding his. "I told you everything would be fine. You made the right choice." But the joy of the moment was tempered by the reality that awaited them. The Council needed to know the truth, and Anakin could no longer live in lies and secrecy. In the following days, while Padme recovered and they cared for the newborns, Anakin prepared to face the Council. He knew it could mean his expulsion from the Order, but there was no going back. The war had ended with Sidious's death, and it was time for honesty. 3 days after the twins' birth, Anakin presented himself before the full Jedi Council. Yoda was in his chair, his ancient eyes studying the young knight with an intensity that seemed to penetrate to his soul. Obi-Wan was present, concern evident in his features. Windu remained austere, but there was an openness in his posture that hadn't existed before. Anakin began slowly, revealing his secret marriage to Padme, the birth of the twins, his fears and how those fears almost led him to betray everything he loved. "I broke the code," he admitted, his voice firm despite the vulnerability. "But it was my love for them that gave me the clarity to see Palpatine for what he really was. I accept whatever punishment the Council decides." The silence that followed was long and tense, each master processing the confession and its implications. The debate that followed was intense and lasted for hours. Windu argued for tradition and maintaining the code, though he acknowledged that Anakin had been instrumental in identifying and bringing down the Sith Lord. Ki-Adi-Mundi expressed concerns about precedence and how other Jedi might interpret any leniency. But it was Yoda who finally brought perspective to the debate. "Fulfilled, the prophecy was," the ancient master said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Balance to the Force the Chosen One brought. Destroyed, the Sith was. Changed, the Order must. Too rigid, we became. Lost our way, perhaps." Obi-Wan supported his former Padawan, speaking about how Anakin's attachment hadn't made him weak, but rather had given him strength to make the right choice at the crucial moment. After deliberation, the Council reached an unprecedented decision. Anakin Skywalker would be promoted to Jedi Master and receive a permanent seat on the Council. becoming the youngest to achieve such honor in the entire history of the Order. His marriage would be quietly recognized, though not publicly announced, and the Order would begin a process of reevaluating its doctrines about attachment. The following months were a period of transformation both for Anakin and the Jedi Order. He constantly found himself torn between his duties on the Council, where he now had a voice in the galaxy's most important decisions, and his desire to be with Padme, Luke, and Leia in their apartment. Obi-Wan became not just his best friend, but a true confidant, someone with whom he could share the joys and challenges of balancing two worlds. "You're doing something extraordinary, Anakin," Obi-Wan told him one evening, as they watched the twins sleep. "You're proving that a Jedi can love without falling to darkness." Padme continued her work as senator in Coruscant, now with the war over and a new era of reconstruction beginning. She and Anakin found a rhythm, a delicate dance between public and private life, between duty and family. The Jedi Order, under the influence of its new perspectives, slowly began to open itself to possibilities that had been closed for millennia, recognizing that inflexible dogma had nearly cost them everything. 5 years had passed since the end of the Clone Wars, and the Jedi Temple in Coruscant breathed an atmosphere of renewal and peace. Luke Skywalker, now old enough to begin his formal training, stood before the Jedi Council alongside other children, awaiting the results of the initiation tests. His blue eyes shone with determination and a touch of anxiety as he felt the weight of the Master's gazes upon him. Anakin watched from his seat on the Council, trying to maintain a neutral expression, but his heart beat rapidly with paternal pride. When Yoda announced that Luke had passed the tests and would be accepted as a youngling, a discreet smile crossed Anakin's face. Little Luke maintained his composure, but Anakin could sense through the Force the explosion of joy and excitement his son tried to contain. It was the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. In the following years, Anakin Skywalker reached heights of power in the Force that no Jedi before him had achieved. His connection with the Force became so deep and refined that he could sense disturbances in distant star systems, move objects of considerable mass with mere thought, and even heal serious injuries through the living energy that permeated all things. The other masters watched him with a mixture of admiration and caution, recognizing that the prophecy of the Chosen One had not only been fulfilled, but continued to manifest in extraordinary ways. Obi-Wan often joked with him during their training sessions. "You're becoming so powerful that soon you won't even need to ignite your lightsaber, Anakin." But with great power came great responsibility, and Anakin felt the weight of being an example not just for the entire Order, but especially for his son, who now followed his footsteps through the temple with admiring eyes. When Luke turned 12 and demonstrated exceptional abilities in handling the Force, Anakin made a formal request to the Council to take him as his Padawan. The decision was controversial, some masters expressing concern about a father training his own son, but the majority recognized that no one better than the most powerful Jedi in history to train someone with such potential. "I sense something special in him, Masters," Anakin explained to the Council. "His connection with the Force is different from mine, more intuitive, more pure. He may come to be as powerful as I am, perhaps even more, but he needs guidance, the right guidance." Yoda agreed with a slow nod. "Teach your son, permitted it will be. But careful, Master Skywalker. Blinded by paternal love, you must not be. Balance, necessary it is." From that day, Luke became Anakin's shadow, accompanying him on diplomatic missions, investigations, and even council sessions when appropriate. The Skywalker family life in Coruscant had become a delicate dance between public and private. Their apartment, located on one of the upper levels of the planet city, was a sanctuary where they could simply be a family. Padme continued her tireless work as senator, now focused on post-war reconstruction legislation and clone rights. Leia grew up beside her mother, absorbing galactic politics as second nature, her sharp intelligence and even sharper tongue. Family meals were sacred, moments when Anakin stopped being the powerful Jedi Master and became just Anakin, husband and father. But even in these moments, tensions occasionally surfaced. Luke spoke enthusiastically about his missions with Anakin, about how he had used the Force to disarm 3 smugglers alone, about how he was getting faster with the lightsaber each day. Leia countered with stories about complex negotiations she had observed, about how words could be as powerful as any saber. Padme and Anakin exchanged meaningful glances, both seeing reflections of themselves in their children. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting in the Senate, Padme found Luke practicing lightsaber movements on their apartment's balcony. His expression concentrated, almost fierce. She watched him for a moment before speaking. "You've been training a lot lately, Luke. Even your father rests sometimes." Luke deactivated the saber and turned to her, sweat running down his forehead. "I need to be strong, Mother. I need to prove I'm worthy of being his Padawan, that it's not just because I'm his son." Padme approached and gently touched his face. "You've already proven that, dear. But strength isn't just about power. Your father took years to learn that." From inside the apartment, Leia appeared, her arms crossed. "You're becoming too much like Dad, Luke. All serious and trying to save the galaxy alone." Luke frowned. "And what's wrong with that?" Leia sighed dramatically. "Nothing, except you forget you have a family. You're becoming obsessed." Padme intervened before the discussion escalated. "Leia is partly right, Luke. You're so talented, so strong. But sometimes you seem to be trying to prove something all the time." Luke grew rapidly, not just in age but in power and capability. At 19, he had become a spectacle of skill with the lightsaber, combining the fluid movements Anakin had developed with his own aggressive and direct technique. His presence in the Force was intense, almost intimidating to some, and he carried a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Anakin recognized in Luke the same hunger he himself had felt at the end of the Clone Wars, that need to prove his worth, to be recognized as powerful and capable. During a mission to resolve a territorial conflict in the core worlds, Luke faced a group of heavily armed mercenaries alone, disarming them with a display of Force power that left even Anakin impressed. But when they returned to the temple, Anakin pulled him aside. "You were reckless today, Luke. Effective, yes, but reckless." Luke stared at him, confusion and frustration in his eyes. "I completed the mission, Master. No one was hurt." Anakin placed a hand on his shoulder. "I see much of myself in you, Luke, including the mistakes I used to make. Power isn't everything. Wisdom, compassion, these things matter as much as strength." When Luke finally passed the trials and was elevated to Jedi Knight at 21, becoming one of the youngest to achieve such rank, the celebration was tempered by profound sadness. Yoda, the ancient Grand Master who had guided the Order for almost 900 years, passed away peacefully in his quarters, becoming one with the Force. The entire temple plunged into mourning, but the Order needed leadership. The council met in special session and unanimously, Anakin Skywalker was named the new Grand Master of the Jedi Order. At 42, he was the youngest to assume such a position, but no one questioned the decision. Obi-Wan was the first to stand and bow. "There is no one more worthy, my friend." Anakin accepted the honor with humility, knowing the shoes he was filling were immense. That night, at home, Padme embraced him as he processed the weight of his new responsibilities. "Yoda always knew you would be his successor," she whispered. Luke and Leia stood beside them, pride evident in their faces. A family united even as the weight of the galaxy rested on their patriarch's shoulders. The years of peace that followed the fall of the Sith were briefer than the Jedi Order had hoped. Reports began arriving from systems in the outer regions about mysterious groups manipulating the Force in ways that defied both Jedi philosophy and Sith tradition. These cults, who called themselves acolytes of the Force, rejected any established dogma, exploring dark and obscure aspects of the energy that permeated the universe. Anakin, now Grand Master, convened an emergency council session when one of these groups attacked a settler colony on Ryloth, using mass mind control techniques. Obi-Wan expressed his concern immediately. "These aren't Sith, Anakin, but they're equally dangerous. Without the rule of two to limit them, they can multiply rapidly." Luke, now sitting in council meetings as a respected knight, watched attentively. Ki-Adi-Mundi raised a fundamental question that would echo through the coming months. But do we have the right to stop them? If they're not Sith, if they simply choose to use the Force differently, what is our authority to intervene? The ethical question deeply divided the council. Mace Windu, always pragmatic, argued that any use of the dark side was a potential threat that needed to be contained. Plo Koon suggested a more diplomatic approach, trying to dialogue with these groups before resorting to force. Anakin found himself in a delicate position, his own experiences with the dark side making him uniquely qualified to understand the attraction, but also deeply aware of the dangers. During a private conversation with Luke after one of the sessions, Anakin expressed his doubts. "I almost fell to the dark side, Luke. I know how seductive it is, how it promises easy solutions to complex problems. But I also know it's destructive." Luke responded with the confidence characteristic of his youth. "Then we need to stop them before they cause more damage, Master. We can't allow the dark side to spread freely." Anakin noticed the absolute certainty in his son's voice, a certainty that reminded him of himself decades ago, and that worried him. The first joint mission of Anakin and Luke to deal with the Acolytes took them to Dathomir, where the Night Sisters had significantly expanded their territory and influence. These warrior women used force magics that the Jedi considered unnatural, manipulating living energy in ways that defied traditional understanding. When they arrived at the planet shrouded in red mists, they were received not with hostility, but with cautious curiosity. The matriarch, a woman named Talzin, invited them to dialogue. "You, Jedi, don't have a monopoly on the Force," she declared, her voice echoing in the stone chamber. "For millennia, my people have used these abilities. We don't serve the dark side. We serve ourselves and our survival." Luke was visibly uncomfortable, his hand hovering near his lightsaber. "You manipulate living beings, control minds. That's wrong." Talzin smiled coldly. "And you, Jedi, don't manipulate? Don't influence with your mind tricks? The difference is only one of degree." Anakin intervened before the tension escalated. "We didn't come here for war, Talzin, but there are reports of your acolytes attacking innocent settlers. That can't continue." The matriarch tilted her head, considering. "There are dissidents among us, it's true, impatient young ones who seek power without wisdom, but they don't represent all the sisters." The negotiations that followed were tense and complex. Anakin proposed an agreement where the Night Sisters would have autonomy in Dathomir, but would be responsible for controlling their own radical elements. Luke objected vehemently when they returned to the ship. "You're making a deal with dark side users, Father. This goes against everything the Order represents." Anakin turned to his son, frustration evident in his eyes. "And what's the alternative, Luke? Exterminate them? Force them to abandon their ancestral traditions? We almost lost everything by being too inflexible. I learned there are shades of gray in the galaxy." Luke clenched his fists, clearly dissatisfied, but remained silent, the first significant crack forming between them. While the Acolytes issue continued to challenge the Order, a more conventional threat emerged at the galaxy's edges. The remnants of the Separatist Confederacy, which had dispersed after the war's end, began reorganizing under the leadership of a brilliant military strategist. His name was Thrawn, a blue-skinned chiss with penetrating red eyes and a tactical mind that rivaled the greatest generals in history. He didn't seek revenge or ideology, but rather order and stability in his vision, and believed the corrupt and inefficient republic needed to be replaced. Entire systems began declaring loyalty to him, attracted by his promise of efficient governance and protection against pirates and criminal cartels. The Senate panicked, and the Chancellor summoned the Jedi. Padme, in her position as senator, warned Anakin about the situation's complexity. "Thrawn isn't a common tyrant. He has genuine support in many worlds. A military response could turn him into a martyr." Anakin knew she was right, but also knew the situation required action. The Council decided to send Anakin and Luke as emissaries, combining diplomacy with military presence if necessary. When they arrived at the system where Thrawn had established his base, they were received with formal courtesy. The Grand Admiral was everything the reports suggested and more, his sharp intelligence evident in every measured word. "Grandmaster Skywalker, it's an honor. I studied your tactics during the Clone Wars. Brilliant, though sometimes reckless. He turned to Luke with interest. "And this must be your son." The resemblance is remarkable, not just in appearance, but in presence. The negotiations began promisingly, Thrawn presenting logical and well-founded arguments about the Republic's failures. Luke, however, saw only a rebel who needed to be stopped. "You're dividing the galaxy again," Luke accused. "How many more lives need to be lost in war?" Thrawn smiled slightly. "I would avoid war, young Skywalker. It's you who bring conflict by trying to impose a failed system on worlds that freely chose another path. This isn't tyranny, it's democracy." Anakin could see both sides of the question with painful clarity, memories of the Clone Wars still vivid in his mind. When they returned to Coruscant without a definitive agreement, Luke pressed for immediate military action. "He's defying the Republic's authority, gathering forces. The longer we wait, the stronger he'll become. We need to act now decisively." His voice echoed through the council chambers with absolute conviction. Anakin felt a knot form in his stomach, hearing echoes of his own younger self in those words. "And how many will die, Luke? How many families will be destroyed? Thrawn has popular support in many systems. A war would be devastating." Luke turned to his father, frustration and disbelief in his eyes. "So what do you suggest? That we watch while the galaxy fragments? You fought in the Clone Wars, sometimes force is necessary." Anakin rose from his chair, his voice low but charged with emotion. "I fought in the Clone Wars, yes. I saw friends die in my arms. I saw entire planets burn. And in the end, I discovered it was all manipulated by a Sith Lord. Forgive me if I'm not eager to repeat that experience." The silence that followed was tense, the entire council witnessing the growing rift between father and son, between ideals of costly peace and decisive action. The following weeks were marked by intense debates in the Jedi Council and the Galactic Senate. Anakin found himself in an impossible position, balancing his role as Grandmaster, his responsibility to the Republic, and his increasingly tense relationship with Luke. During a particularly heated council session, Obi-Wan tried to mediate. "Anakin, you're right to be cautious. But Luke also has a point. We can't ignore a growing threat." Anakin ran his hand through his hair, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "I know, old friend, but there's a difference between responding to a threat and starting a war. We need a strategy that minimizes lives lost." Luke, who was present as an observer, couldn't contain his frustration. "While we debate, Thrawn consolidates his power. Each day that passes, more systems join him." Anakin looked at his son with a mixture of pride and concern. "And each day we use to plan properly is a day that can save thousands of lives in the future." Padme became a crucial ally in formulating a balanced strategy. In a private meeting in their apartment, she spread intelligence data holograms across the table. "Thrawn is brilliant, but he's not invincible. His allies joined him out of convenience, not ideological loyalty. If we can offer a better alternative, we can fragment his coalition." Leia, now 21 and a skilled negotiator in her own right, added her perspective. "Mother is right. Thrawn built his power base on the promise of efficiency and order. If the Republic can demonstrate real reforms, many of his supporters might reconsider." Luke shook his head, clearly impatient. "And while we try to reform the Republic, he prepares for war. This is naivety." Anakin slammed his hand on the table, his patience finally exhausted. "Enough, Luke. This arrogance, this absolute certainty that you're right, is exactly what almost destroyed me. Learn from my mistakes before you make your own." The silence that followed was heavy and painful. Luke stared at his father, hurt and anger mixed in his blue eyes. "I'm not you, father. I won't hesitate when action is necessary." He stood and left the apartment, leaving the family in uncomfortable silence. Padme gently touched Anakin's arm. "He's young, Ani. He still sees the world in black and white, just as you did." Anakin sighed deeply, pain evident in his expression. "I see so much of myself in him, Padme. The impulsiveness, the need to prove his worth, the absolute certainty. I'm afraid of what that might lead him to do." Leia, who had observed the exchange in silence, finally spoke. Then you need to guide him, Dad. Not with confrontation, but with example. Show him there's strength in patience, power in wisdom. In the following days, Anakin summoned Luke for a private conversation in the temple's meditation gardens. Luke, I know you're frustrated with me, but I need you to understand something. When I was your age, at the end of the Clone Wars, I was exactly like you. Confident, powerful, convinced I always knew the right answer. And that arrogance almost cost me everything I loved. Luke crossed his arms defensively. I'm not arrogant. I'm being practical. Thrawn is a threat. Anakin placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Yes, he is, and we're going to deal with him. But we're going to do it the right way, with strategy, not just with brute force. I need you at my side in this, Luke. Luke remained silent for a long moment before finally relaxing his posture. What do you propose then? The plan was put into action with precision. Padme and Leia worked the Senate tirelessly, passing reforms that decentralized power and increased member systems' autonomy. Several of Thrawn's allies began reconsidering their positions. Meanwhile, Anakin and Luke led an impressive fleet to the systems controlled by Thrawn, but maintained a defensive position. When Thrawn requested a meeting, Anakin accepted immediately. Aboard a neutral space station, the two strategists met. You are wiser than I anticipated, Grandmaster, Thrawn observed. Many in your position would have simply attacked. Anakin inclined his head. I learned that force without wisdom is just destruction. Thrawn presented his demands, many already being implemented. You've put me in a difficult position, Skywalker, he admitted with respect. Anakin leaned forward. Then don't continue. You're a brilliant man, Thrawn. The galaxy needs minds like yours, but working within the system, not against it. Come to Coruscant, serve as military advisor. Help us build the republic you envision. Luke couldn't contain himself. Father, you can't be serious. He gathered forces against the Republic. Anakin kept his eyes on Thrawn. And now he has the chance to use his genius for something constructive. Isn't that what we seek as Jedi? Redemption. Thrawn studied Anakin for a long moment before nodding. Very well. I accept your offer. When their hands clasped, Luke watched with reluctant admiration, beginning to understand the wisdom in his father's approach. With Thrawn neutralized through diplomacy, attention returned to the acolytes of the Force. Anakin proposed a new doctrine where the Order would recognize it didn't have a monopoly on the Force. Luke actively participated in these missions, even apologizing to Talzin on Dathomir. I was wrong to assume you were enemies simply for being different. In the following months, agreements were established with various groups, creating a network of mutual understanding. One evening, the Skywalker family gathered for dinner. Luke looked at his father. Father, I need to apologize to you. I was so focused on proving I was strong that I forgot that real strength includes knowing when not to fight. Anakin smiled with pride. You don't need to prove anything to me, Luke. You're extraordinary because you have a good heart and the will to learn. Padme raised her glass. To our family and to the peace we built together. Anakin, observing his children and wife, felt his choices from decades ago finally leading not to tragedy, but to renewed hope for the entire galaxy.